Take that thing off him before it steals the next heartbeat. Clara Bennett's voice cut through the royal chamber with enough force to stop every physician in the room. For 7 heartbeats, Prince Noah Blackwood had not breathed. He lay motionless beneath layers of white linen, his small face drained of color, dark lashes resting against cheeks that had once been warm with mischief. 6 iron braziers burned around the bed, yet frost continued to spread across the stone beneath him, thin silver veins crawling outward as though winter itself had found a way inside the castle. Dr. Samuel Whitmore pressed 2 fingers to the boy's throat. 1, he whispered. No pulse. 2. Alpha King Ethan Blackwood stood on the opposite side of the bed, one enormous hand wrapped around his son's wrist. He was a man built to command battlefields, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black leather and a heavy wolf fur mantle. But grief had made him unnaturally still. The room did not dare breathe for him. 3. Clara stood near the wash basin with a bundle of blood-stained towels held against her apron. She was not supposed to speak. Maids did not interrupt royal physicians. They carried water, changed sheets, emptied basins, and made themselves small enough to disappear when powerful men were frightened. Clara had been trained to disappear, but the medallion on Noah's chest was moving, not swinging, beating. The black stone set into the silver wolf's head lifted once beneath the boy's nightshirt, then settled. A moment later, it rose again. 4. Clara stared at it. The physicians had been watching Noah's lips, his pupils, the dark veins beneath his skin. The guards had been watching the doors. The king had been watching his son's face. No one was watching the medallion. 5. A faint sound escaped the stone. Clara almost convinced herself it was the fire cracking behind her. Then the medallion pulsed again, and Noah's fingers curled as if something beneath his skin had pulled a string. Her mother had once warned her about objects that borrowed life. They did not kill quickly. They drank carefully. 6. Clara dropped the towels. The sound was small, but every guard turned. She crossed the chamber before fear could catch her. A physician reached for her arm. She slipped past him, collided with the edge of the bed, and pointed at the silver chain around Noah's throat. Take it off. Dr. Whitmore looked at her as though a chair had spoken. Remove this servant. 2 guards advanced. 7. The physician whispered. Noah's chest remained still. Clara lunged toward the bed. Steel left its sheath with a sharp metallic cry. Captain Mason Cole's sword stopped against the pale skin beneath her jaw. One more step would open her throat. Clara did not move. Neither did the black stone. Then, beneath the blade, she saw it pulse again. Once. Strongly. Like a stolen heart. She raised her eyes to the Alpha King. Your son's heart hasn't stopped, she said. That thing is beating with it. For the first time that night, Ethan Blackwood looked away from his dying child. He looked directly at the maid. 6 hours earlier, Prince Noah Blackwood had refused to eat for the 3rd time that morning. The untouched bowl of broth sat on the carved oak table beside his bed, its surface already forming a thin skin beneath the cold air of the chamber. 2 physicians had tried coaxing him. One had threatened medicine. Another had promised sugared figs. Noah had turned his face toward the wall for all of them. Clara Bennett entered carrying fresh linen and a small wooden tray. She kept her eyes lowered as she crossed the room. That was how maids moved through royal spaces, quietly, carefully, as though the stone itself might report them for taking up too much air. She placed the folded sheets near the hearth. You can leave the soup, Noah said without turning. I'm not eating it. I wasn't going to ask you to. That made him look. He was 8 years old, pale beneath the fever, with dark hair damp against his forehead and the same gray eyes as his father. Even weakened, there was something guarded in the way he watched her, as though illness had not made him less royal, only more tired of being treated like glass. Clara reached into her apron pocket and removed an apple. Noah frowned. What is that for? An experiment. With an apple? With a knife. His eyes narrowed with interest despite himself. Clara sat on the stool near the window and began cutting. Her hands worked slowly, shaving away the red skin in thin curls. She carved pointed ears, a blunt nose, and 4 uneven legs. When she placed the finished creature beside the soup, it leaned heavily to one side. Noah stared at it. That is the worst wolf I have ever seen. It survived the carving. That does not make it a wolf. It makes it determined. A small sound escaped him before he could stop it. Not quite laughter, but close enough that Clara felt something in the room loosen. She tore a piece from the bread beside the bowl and dipped it into the broth. "For the determined wolf," she said. Noah took it from her. He ate one piece, then another. Clara did not smile. Servants learn not to celebrate victories too openly around frightened people. She simply kept carving the apple while he finished half the broth. When he slowed, his fingers moved to the silver medallion resting against his chest. The object was newly polished, shaped like a wolf's head with a black stone set between its eyes. "It hurts again," he whispered. Clara's knife stopped. "Your fever." He shook his head. "Here." He pressed the medallion. "It started after the heir ceremony," he said. "Uncle Grant told me never to remove it, not even when I sleep." Clara looked at the black stone. For one brief moment, the firelight touched its surface. The reflection moved in the wrong direction. By noon, the royal physicians had filled Prince Noah's chamber with enough medicine to scent the entire eastern wing. Bitterroots simmered in copper pots. Dried moonflower burned inside shallow iron bowls, sending pale smoke toward the rafters. Glass bottles crowded the table beside the bed, each marked with the seal of a different healer, each containing another answer that had failed. Clara stood near the hearth with a basin of clean water balanced against her hip. She was there because someone needed to replace the cloths beneath Noah's neck. Nothing more. Dr. Samuel Whitmore had made that clear when she entered. "Do not speak to the prince. Do not touch the instruments. Do not interfere." Clara had lowered her eyes. "Yes, doctor." Now she watched him pour a thin golden medicine into a silver cup. Around the bed stood 3 physicians, 2 guards, Alpha King Ethan Blackwood and Grant Holloway. Grant wore the dark green cloak of the king's beta, fastened at the throat with a polished iron clasp. His face held the controlled concern of a man who understood exactly how grief should look in public. "The fever has entered his blood, Dr. Whitmore said. "This should force his wolf to surface." Noah lay beneath the blankets, too weak to argue. Clara dipped a cloth into the basin. The moment Dr. Whitmore carried the cup toward the bed, the medicine changed. It was subtle. Gold became amber. Amber deepened into brown. By the time the cup reached Noah's lips, the liquid was almost black. Clara looked toward the windows, wondering whether a cloud had crossed the sun. The light had not changed. "Drink," Grant said gently. He leaned over Noah and placed 2 fingers against the medallion on the boy's chest. The carved silver wolf turned. Clara's hand stopped beneath the water. It could not have turned. The medallion was a single piece of metal. She had polished enough silver in her life to know the difference between moving light and moving metal. Yet the wolf's muzzle now pointed toward Noah's heart. The boy swallowed one mouthful. His breath caught. Grant's fingers tightened over the black stone. Noah's next breath came thinner, then thinner still. Clara lifted the cloth from the basin. Water streamed across her wrist, cold enough to make her skin ache. No one else seemed to notice. The physicians were watching the fever marks along Noah's throat. Ethan was watching his son's face. Grant was watching everyone. Clara moved toward the medicine table as though collecting a stained towel. A single golden drop remained on the rim of the bottle. She let it fall onto an iron spoon. Nothing happened. Then she carried the spoon one step closer to the bed. White frost spread across the metal. Clara stopped breathing. She moved it back. The frost began to melt. Closer again. Ice climbed over the handle and touched her fingers. The medicine was not poison. It became poison only when it entered the medallion's reach. Behind her, Noah made a small, broken sound. Grant pressed the black stone more firmly against his chest. The fire in the nearest brazier turned blue. Clara stared at the frozen spoon in her hand and understood something every physician in the room had missed. They were not strengthening the prince's wolf. They were feeding the thing that was consuming it. The medicine is feeding it. Clara's voice was not loud, but it entered the chamber like a blade drawn across silk. Dr. Whitmore paused with the cup halfway to Noah's mouth. Every face turned toward her. Clara stood beside the medicine table, the frozen iron spoon trembling between her fingers. Frost had climbed over its handle and whitened the skin of her palm, yet she barely felt the cold. "The medallion changes the medicine," she said. "It becomes darker when it gets close to him. Please, take it off before you give him another dose." For 3 breaths, no one moved. Then Dr. Whitmore set the cup down with deliberate care. "Where did you get that spoon?" Clara swallowed. "From the table. You were told not to touch the instruments." I know, but you contaminated a royal treatment. His anger was controlled, which made it worse. Shouting could be answered. Disappointment from a man accustomed to being obeyed left no space for defense. Clara looked toward Ethan Blackwood. The Alpha King's face revealed nothing, but his eyes had dropped to the frost coating the spoon. Grant Holloway noticed. He crossed the chamber before Clara could speak again and took the spoon from her hand using a folded cloth. The girl has been alone with the prince, he said. Clara's stomach tightened. I brought his meals and handled his linens, his cup, his medicine table. I never touched the medicine until now. Grant turned the spoon beneath the light. Convenient. Noah shifted weakly beneath the blankets. Clara stepped toward him. A guard blocked her path. The wolf on the medallion moved, she said. I saw it turn toward his heart. Dr. Whitmore's expression changed from anger to something colder. Enough. It is hurting him. Enough. Grant looked at Ethan. She may be frightened, or she may be trying to frighten us. Either way, she cannot remain here. Clara stared at the king. He was close enough that she could see the sleeplessness beneath his eyes, the tension locked along his jaw. He looked like a man being asked to choose between impossible things, the physicians who had served his bloodline for decades, and a maid holding a frozen spoon. Search her quarters, Grant said. Until we know what she touched, she should be confined. Captain Mason Cole hesitated. Ethan did not order him to stop. That silence decided everything. The guards took Clara by the arms. She did not struggle. Struggling gave powerful men permission to call fear guilt. As they dragged her toward the door, she twisted once toward the bed. Do not let them give him more. Grant stepped between them. Know your place. Clara looked past him at Noah. His eyes were barely open. The physicians gathered around the bed again. Dr. Whitmore lifted the darkened cup. Ethan remained beside his son, one hand gripping the carved bedpost hard enough to whiten his knuckles. The door began to close. Then Noah spoke. The sound was no louder than breath against glass. Clara. Everyone stopped. His small hand moved across the blanket, reaching toward the empty space where she had stood. Clara saw it. The door shut between them. The guards locked her inside the linen room at the end of the eastern corridor. Shelves of folded sheets rose around her like pale walls. Clara pressed both hands against the wood and listened. For several seconds, there was nothing. Then a bell began ringing inside the prince's chamber. Once, twice, then continuously. The royal signal for a failing heart. The bell did not stop ringing. Clara stood inside the linen room with both hands pressed against the locked door, listening to the sound tear through the eastern corridor. It was not an alarm for fire or invasion. Every servant in Blackwood Keep knew that pattern. A royal heart was failing. Footsteps thundered toward her. The key struck the lock so hard it missed once. Captain Mason Cole opened the door. The prince said your name. That was all he gave her. Clara ran. She passed servants flattened against the walls, guards shouting for space, physicians carrying bottles that clinked together in their trembling hands. By the time she reached Noah's chamber, the room had become something between a sick room and a battlefield. Dr. Whitmore leaned over the bed. Noah's body arched beneath him, then fell still. The dark veins had reached his jaw. His pulse is gone, one physician said. Dr. Whitmore lifted the final cup. The medicine inside was black. Stop. No one listened. Clara crossed the room. A guard caught her shoulder. Mason knocked his hand away. Dr. Whitmore tipped the cup toward Noah's lips. Clara struck it from his hand. Silver hit stone. The medicine splashed across the floor, steaming where it touched. For one breath, the entire chamber froze. Then Grant Holloway moved. Seize her. Clara was already at the bed. She pulled the small knife from the fruit tray beside Noah's untouched meal. Ethan stepped forward, but she did not look at him. She hooked the blade beneath the silver chain and pulled. The metal resisted. The black stone pulsed. Once. Twice. Noah's fingers jerked against the sheet. Clara sought harder. The chain snapped. The medallion came free in her hand. Cold shot through her palms so violently that her vision whitened, but she held on. Something inside the stone moved beneath its surface, not like light, but like an eye turning toward her. Put it down, Grant said. Clara looked at him. He was afraid. That was the first honest expression she had seen on his face. She turned and threw the medallion into the nearest brazier. Grant shouted. The silver wolf struck the coals and split with a sound too high and thin to belong to metal. Every flame in the room turned blue. Then came the scream. It rose from inside the medallion. Small. Childlike. Wrong. The guard stepped back. One physician dropped to his knees. Dr. Whitmore stared into the fire as black smoke twisted upward, taking the shape of a wolf with an open mouth. Clara grabbed the iron poker. Grant lunged for her. Ethan caught him by the throat and drove him against the stone wall. Do not touch her. Clara brought the poker down. The black stone shattered. At that exact moment, Noah's body lifted from the bed. His mouth opened. A breath tore into his lungs. Deep, ragged, alive. The black veins beneath his skin began retreating toward his chest. No one spoke. No one seemed capable of it. Clara stood beside the blue fire, the iron poker still raised in her burned hand. Behind her, the future king took another breath. Then another. And Alpha King Ethan Blackwood looked from his living son to the maid everyone had ordered into silence. Noah's third breath did not come easily. His chest rose, held, then collapsed beneath the linen as though something inside him had remembered how to breathe, but not how to continue. The dark veins had stopped climbing, yet they had not disappeared. They remained gathered beneath his skin in thin black branches, all of them pointing toward the brazier. Clara saw the smoke move first. It had not vanished when the stone shattered. It had only become smaller. A narrow thread of darkness slipped between the blue flames, twisting low over the coals before crawling toward the bed. No one else noticed. The physicians were surrounding Noah, calling for blankets, warm water, another tonic. Ethan was gripping his son's hand. The guards were watching Grant. The smoke reached the floor. No, Clara whispered. She dropped the iron poker and ran toward the medicine table. Dr. Whitmore looked up. What are you doing? It is still attached to him. She seized the shallow iron bowl used for burning moonflower, emptied the gray ashes across the table, and grabbed the vinegar bottle beside the surgical cloths. Grant twisted against Ethan's hold. She has done enough. Clara ignored him. She poured vinegar into the bowl, then swept a handful of coarse salt from the meal tray into it. The mixture hissed. The smell cut through the chamber. Sharp, sour, almost clean. The black thread changed direction. It moved toward her. Clara placed the bowl on the floor between the brazier and the bed. Come on, she whispered. You were hungry before. The smoke gathered above the vinegar. For one terrible moment, it formed the shape of a child's face. Then it dropped into the bowl. Clara slammed an iron plate over the top. The metal jumped beneath her hands. Once, twice. A scream struck the inside of the bowl, muffled but furious. Frost spread across the plate, burning her already injured palm. She pressed down harder until the movement weakened. Behind her, Noah coughed. The dark veins beneath his throat faded to gray. Dr. Whitmore placed his fingers against the boy's pulse. His expression changed. Steady, he said, almost to himself. It is steady. Ethan bowed his head over his son's hand. The Alpha King did not weep, but something in his shoulders broke. Clara remained kneeling beside the iron bowl, afraid that if she moved, the thing inside would find another way out. Then Grant laughed. It was a quiet sound, too quiet for the room. Everyone turned toward him. Remarkable, he said. Ethan released his throat slowly. Grant straightened his cloak. A maid recognizes a royal curse no physician has ever seen. She knows what awakens it. She knows how to trap it. She even knows the exact moment to appear and save the prince. Clara felt the room change. Relief did not disappear. It hardened into suspicion. Grant looked directly at her. Only the person who cast the curse would know how to break it. That is a lie, Clara said. Is it? He pointed toward her burned hand, the shattered medallion, the sealed bowl trembling beneath her fingers. You touched his food. You entered his chamber alone. You handled the medicine. And now every piece of evidence has been destroyed by your own hand. Dr. Whitmore looked at Clara, not with anger this time, with uncertainty. That hurt more. Ethan lifted his gaze from Noah. His face had become unreadable again. Captain Cole, he said. Mason stepped forward. Clara looked at the king. For one moment, she thought he would defend her. Instead, Ethan's eyes moved to the iron bowl. Seal it. Guard my son. Take the maid into custody until I know the truth. Mason's hands closed around Clara's wrists. She did not resist. As they pulled her away, Noah stirred beneath the blankets. His eyes opened only halfway. Father, he whispered. Ethan leaned close. Noah looked past him toward Clara. She saved me. The words followed her into the corridor. So did the sound of chains. The chains were removed 3 hours later. The cell door remained locked. Clara sat on the narrow wooden bench with both burned hands wrapped in rough linen, listening to water drip somewhere beyond the stone wall. The dungeon beneath Blackwood Keep was colder than the prince's chamber, but the cold here was honest. It did not move beneath the skin. It did not breathe through silver. Footsteps approached, not the hurried rhythm of guards. These were slower, measured, the kind of footsteps that expected every door to open before they reached it. Alpha King Ethan Blackwood appeared beyond the iron bars without his crown or fur mantle. He wore a plain black tunic, the sleeves rolled to his forearms. Without the symbols of rank, he looked no less powerful, only more tired. Captain Mason unlocked the door. Ethan entered alone. Clara stood. "You may sit," he said. She remained standing, his eyes lowered to her bandaged palms. "My son is awake." Relief struck her so sharply that she had to steady herself against the wall. "He asked for you." Clara closed her eyes for one breath. Ethan watched her carefully, not as a king watched a servant, as a man examined the only witness to something he did not yet understand. "We searched your quarters," he said. "I expected you would. We found no poison, no ritual objects, no correspondence with foreign pacts." Clara said nothing. "We found paper." Her stomach tightened. Ethan drew several folded scraps from inside his tunic. They were stained with water and marked in Clara's small handwriting. Medicine turned dark near the bed. Fire changed blue when Grant touched the stone. Prince's pain began after air ceremony. "You recorded everything," Ethan said. "I was trying to see the pattern. Why hide the notes beneath the linen?" "Because Dr. Whitmore told me not to interfere." Something moved behind Ethan's eyes. Not anger, recognition. He placed the papers on the bench. Grant selected the craftsman who restored the medallion. Clara looked up. The craftsman disappeared 2 days after the ceremony. So did his apprentice. A guard who transported the medallion was found drowned last month. 3 people. 3 silences. Ethan stepped closer. "Your mother's name was Eleanor Bennett." Clara's breath caught. "She served as a battlefield healer during the Western Rebellion," he continued. "No title, no place in the Royal Guild. Yet soldiers survived wounds the physicians had abandoned. She taught me what she could. She was accused of forbidden practice. She accused a nobleman of using cursed iron, and no one believed her." Clara met his eyes. "No one important." The words settled between them. Ethan looked toward the locked door, then back at her. "Why did you risk your life for my son?" It was not the question of a king seeking evidence. It was quieter than that. Clara thought of Noah pretending not to enjoy the crooked apple wolf. She thought of his hand reaching toward the door as the guards dragged her away. "Because everyone was discussing who would be blamed," she said, while he was still dying. Ethan went completely still. For the first time, Clara saw shame cross the Alpha King's face. He had allowed them to remove her. He had chosen rank over observation, and his son had nearly died for it. Ethan turned toward the door. "Captain." Mason entered. "Release her." Clara stared at him. Ethan looked back once. "This is not mercy," he said. "It is correction." Then his voice hardened into something the entire keep would soon understand. "And before sunrise, I want every man connected to that medallion found." Clara's mother had never called it magic. Magic is what powerful men name the things they wish to own, Eleanor Bennett had once told her. What we do is observe. She had taught Clara to recognize cursed iron by the way flame bent away from it, poisoned silver by the frost it left on clean steel, and binding stones by the rhythm they borrowed from living hearts. Eleanor had learned those things while treating soldiers no royal physician would touch. She had saved dozens. Then she accused Lord Holloway's father of placing cursed iron inside enemy wounds. The Healers Guild stripped her name from its records. No one had called her a healer again. Until now. Clara stood inside the sealed evidence chamber beneath Blackwood Keep, facing the iron bowl that contained the remains of Noah's curse. Ethan stood beside her while Captain Mason guarded the door. "The stone is broken," Ethan said. "Can it still harm him?" "Not from here." "Can it identify the person who made it?" Clara looked at the thin black vapor leaking beneath the bowl's rim. "No, but whoever made it may believe it can." Ethan understood before she explained. By sunset, a message traveled through the keep. The curse had not been destroyed. The royal physicians required the original craftsman's method before it could be removed permanently from Prince Noah's blood. The lie was spoken only once. Fear carried it everywhere. They waited after midnight. Clara stood behind a tapestry inside the evidence chamber. Ethan remained in the darkness near the western wall, silent enough that even the guards outside could not sense him. For nearly an hour, nothing moved. Then the lock clicked. Grant Holloway entered carrying no candle. He crossed directly to the iron bowl, not searching, not hesitating, knowing exactly where it had been placed. He removed a small key from beneath his collar and opened the clasp securing the lid. Black vapor rose toward his hand like a dog recognizing its master. "Careful," Clara said. Grant spun around. Ethan stepped from the darkness. The Alpha King did not raise his voice. "You knew where it was." Grant's face changed only once. Then control returned. "I came to protect the prince." With a key to a sealed royal chamber? Grant's hand closed around the black fragment. Mason entered with 4 guards. Grant backed toward the wall. "You have no proof." Clara emerged from behind the tapestry. "The curse reacted to you." "It reacted to everyone." "No," she said. "It fed when you touched the medallion. It followed your hand in Noah's chamber. And now it recognizes you." The black vapor coiled around Grant's wrist. His skin began to darken. He tried to throw the fragment away, but it clung to his palm. Ethan watched him without mercy. "Why, my son?" Grant's breathing broke. "Because you would never surrender the throne. So you chose a child." "I chose the kingdom." The words exploded from him. He confessed everything after that: the restored medallion, the missing craftsman, the council's plan to leave Ethan without an heir and force a political marriage controlled by Holloway blood. When he finished, the chamber was silent. Ethan looked at Clara, not at her dress, her rank, or her burned hands. At her. The woman whose mother had been erased for telling the truth had used that same truth to save his son and expose a traitor. This time, someone powerful had listened. "Take him," Ethan said. As the guards dragged Grant away, the black fragment fell from his hand. Clara crushed it beneath an iron hammer. The vapor vanished. Far above them, in the prince's chamber, every candle flame turned gold. The great hall of Blackwood Keep had never been silent for a maid. It had fallen silent for victories, executions, royal births, and declarations of war. It had fallen silent when Alpha King Ethan Blackwood entered wearing the iron crown of the Northern Pax. But never for a woman in a plain gray dress with bandages wrapped around both hands. Clara Bennett stood at the foot of the raised platform while every lord, physician, guard, and servant in the kingdom watched her. Grant Holloway knelt in chains before the throne. He no longer wore the dark green cloak of the king's beta. His insignia had been torn from his chest. Without rank, he looked smaller, though nothing about his crimes had become less monstrous. The evidence was read aloud. The altered medallion. The murdered craftsman. The curse placed against the heart of an 8-year-old boy. The plan to leave the throne without an heir. Grant did not deny it. He only lifted his head once, when the doors at the rear of the hall opened. Prince Noah entered holding Captain Mason Cole's hand. A murmur moved through the crowd. He was pale and walked slowly, but he was alive. No dark veins marked his throat. No frost followed his steps. The wolf emblem embroidered across his small black tunic gleamed gold beneath the torchlight. Ethan rose from the throne. For one brief moment, he was not a king before his court. He was a father seeing his son cross a room he had nearly been carried out of forever. Noah released Mason's hand. He walked past the physicians, past the nobles, past Grant. He stopped in front of Clara. "You made the apple wolf wrong," he said. The hall remained perfectly still. Clara looked down at him. One leg was shorter. 2 legs. Then it was a rare breed. Noah smiled. The sound that moved through the hall was not laughter exactly. It was relief, finally allowed to breathe. Then Noah took Clara's bandaged hand. Grant lowered his eyes. Ethan descended from the platform. Dr. Samuel Whitmore stepped forward before the king could speak. He removed the silver chain marking him as head royal physician and held it in both hands. "I treated the illness I expected to find," he said. She observed the danger that was actually there. His gaze moved across the assembled healers. "We dismissed her because she had no title. The prince nearly died because we confused rank with knowledge." He bowed to Clara, not deeply, but publicly. That made it more powerful. Ethan stopped beside his son. "The woman standing before you entered the prince's chamber carrying clean linen," he said. His voice reached every corner of the hall without effort. She left it carrying his life back to him. No one moved. The physicians commanded her silence. My beta accused her. My guards imprisoned her. His eyes shifted toward Clara. And I allowed it. The admission struck the room harder than any threat. Kings did not confess mistakes before servants. Ethan Blackwood did. She saw what we did not. She acted when we hesitated. And my son breathes because she refused to remember her place. He turned toward the court. Remember hers now. A guard brought forward a dark blue mantle embroidered with the silver wolf of Blackwood. Ethan took it himself and placed it over Clara's shoulders. Clara Bennett will study under the royal physicians with full authority of the crown. She may enter any chamber where a life is in danger. She may question any healer, lord, or councilman without punishment. His gaze hardened. And anyone who attempts to silence her will answer to me. Noah squeezed her hand. Clara looked around the hall at the same people who had once seen her only when a cup was empty or a floor needed cleaning. Now they knew her name. Not because she had discovered noble blood. Not because fate had declared her special. Because she had watched. Because she had remembered. Because she had acted while everyone more powerful stood still. That evening, Noah slept without fever for the first time in weeks. Clara stood near his window, watching snow settle across the castle roofs. Her new mantle rested over the back of a chair. She had not yet grown accustomed to wearing something no one expected her to wash. The door opened behind her. Ethan entered alone. He placed a second chair beside hers. "Sit," he said. Clara glanced at him. Was that an order? His mouth shifted, almost a smile. No, he sat first. A request. For a while, neither of them spoke. They watched the snow fall over the kingdom she had helped save. And for the first time in her life, Clara did not make herself smaller to share the room. 3 months after the curse was broken, Clara Bennett entered the royal infirmary through the front door. The difference should not have mattered. A door was wood, iron hinges, and a lock. Yet for most of her life, Clara had entered important rooms through servant passages, side corridors, and narrow stairwells built to keep people like her from being seen. She had carried water into chambers where decisions were made, then disappeared before anyone remembered she had been there. Now 2 guards opened the infirmary doors for her. "Good morning, Healer Bennett." Clara still turned sometimes, expecting another woman to answer. She wore a dark blue dress beneath a fitted gray apron, both marked with the silver wolf of Blackwood. The fabric was finer than anything she had owned before, though she had refused the gold embroidery Ethan's tailor suggested. Gold did not make hands steadier. Observation did. Inside, 6 apprentices stood around a long oak table. Dr. Whitmore waited at the head, silver hair tied neatly behind his neck. He had returned to wearing the chain of office, but something in him had changed. He no longer treated certainty as proof. On the table lay 3 iron cups, a strip of stained linen, and a broken silver clasp. "What do you see?" he asked. The apprentices leaned closer. One named the discoloration. Another identified the scent of bitterroot. A third suggested poison. Clara did not look at the cups first. She looked at the candle beside them. Its flame bent away from the silver clasp. "The clasp," she said. "It was carried near cursed iron." Dr. Whitmore nodded. "Correct." No one in the room laughed. No one asked whether a maid had the right to answer. That was how change often began, not with applause, but with the absence of cruelty where cruelty had once been expected. The infirmary door opened. Noah stepped inside carrying an apple. He had grown stronger. Color had returned to his face, and his wolf had surfaced for the first time 2 weeks earlier, breaking 3 chairs and frightening an entire line of tutors. He placed the apple on Clara's table. "For scientific purposes." She examined it solemnly. "This appears dangerous. It becomes worse when you use a knife." Dr. Whitmore hid a smile. Behind Noah stood Ethan. The Alpha King wore no crown that morning. Only a black tunic and a dark wool cloak dusted with snow. Even without ceremony, he filled the doorway. Broad shoulders. Controlled stillness. The quiet power of a man who no longer needed the room to fear him in order to command it. His gaze found Clara immediately. It had begun doing that often. At council meetings. In the great hall. Across crowded corridors where she once would have lowered her eyes. "The southern healers have arrived," he said. "They requested to meet the woman who broke the Holloway curse." Clara looked toward the waiting apprentices. My lesson is not finished. Ethan glanced at Dr. Whitmore. The physician folded his hands. She has 20 minutes remaining. Noah climbed onto the nearest chair. My father can wait. The apprentices stared at the prince. Ethan considered his son. Then he moved to the wall and stood beside the servants who had paused there carrying folded cloth. I can wait, he said. Clara returned to the table. For the next 20 minutes, the most powerful man in the Northern Kingdom remained silent while she taught. When the lesson ended, Ethan walked beside her through the main corridor. Not ahead. Beside. You refused another title, he said. I already have one. Healer. Clara. He looked at her for a long moment. Outside the windows, winter sunlight spread across the stone. I would like to know her better. Clara's steps slowed. This was not an order. There were no witnesses waiting for an answer, no mate bond demanding obedience, no crown turning gratitude into ownership. Only a man who had learned to ask. She met his eyes. Then walk with her. Ethan offered his arm. Clara did not take it. Not yet. But she continued beside him, neither behind nor beneath, while Noah followed them through the corridor, carving a crooked wolf from an apple. And throughout Blackwood Keep, servants began using the front doors. The first time Clara Bennett sat at the Alpha King's table, every servant in the great hall noticed. So did every lord. The Winter Council had gathered beneath the blackened silver banners of Blackwood Keep. Maps covered the long oak table. Wax seals, sharpened quills, and untouched cups of wine stood between men who had spent their lives believing authority could be measured by the height of a chair. Clara's chair was beside Ethan's. Not behind him. Not near the physician's. Beside him. She had almost refused. Then Noah had taken her hand and whispered, If you stand near the wall, they will keep thinking that is where you belong. So she sat. The room adjusted around her. Some councilmen lowered their eyes. Others stared openly. Lord Everett Shaw, the oldest member of the Northern Council, looked at Clara's plain blue dress and then at Ethan. This meeting concerns border law, he said. Not medicine. Ethan did not answer immediately. He had learned that silence could force truth out of people faster than anger. Clara rested her hands on the table. The scars across her palms had faded from red to silver, thin lines left by the medallion that had tried to steal a child's life. The western villages reported 32 cases of fever, she said. All began after grain arrived from Holloway Land. Lord Shaw frowned. And the grain contains black mold. A servant's guess? A healer's observation. The words came from Dr. Whitmore, seated across the table. He placed a sealed cloth packet beside the maps. We tested it this morning. She is correct. The silence that followed was familiar, not disbelief. Recognition arriving too late. Clara opened the map and marked 3 villages with charcoal. Burn the contaminated stores. Send clean grain before the snow closes the northern road. Separate anyone coughing blood from the elderly and children. Lord Shaw leaned back. You speak as though you command royal resources. Clara looked toward Ethan. He was watching her, but he did not rescue her from the question. He allowed her to answer it herself. I speak as though people will die while powerful men debate who has permission to save them. Noah, seated near the end of the table for his first council lesson, tried unsuccessfully to hide a smile. Lord Shaw's face reddened. Ethan finally moved. He slid the royal seal across the table until it stopped before Clara. Approve whatever she requires. No one challenged her again. By nightfall, wagons loaded with grain left Blackwood Keep under armed escort. Clara stood on the eastern battlement watching torchlight descend the snowy road. Wind pulled loose strands of hair across her face. Ethan joined her without guards. You embarrassed Lord Shaw, he said. He will survive. I am less certain about his pride. She smiled. For a while, they watched the wagons disappear between the pines. Then Ethan removed something from inside his cloak. A small wooden wolf. Its legs were uneven. Its ears were too large. One side had been carved more carefully than the other. Noah helped, he said. That explains the damage. He claims it is a rare breed. Clara turned it over in her hands. There was no crown carved into its head. No chain around its neck. Only a wolf standing beside another, both facing the same direction. Ethan's voice softened. I cannot promise you a life without danger. I would not believe you if you did. I can promise never to ask you to become smaller, so I may feel greater. Clara looked at him. This was not gratitude speaking, not obligation. not the desperate devotion of a father whose child had just been saved. It was something slower, something chosen. She placed the wooden wolf inside her cloak. Then, for the first time, she took his offered hand. Below them, the kingdom moved through the darkness, carrying food toward people who would never know the name of the woman who had saved them. Clara did not need them to. She had spent years believing invisibility meant she had no value. Now she understood the truth. Being unseen had taught her to see everything. And beside her, the Alpha King had finally learned to look. The kingdom did not call Clara Bennett a queen the day she saved it a second time. It called her late. The northern villages had already begun burying their dead when the first council messenger returned to Blackwood Keep. Lord Shaw's delay had cost them 3 days. 3 days of contaminated grain passing from kitchens to tables, from mothers to children, from one frightened household to the next. Clara read the report once. Then she folded it carefully. How many? Ethan asked. 47 dead. More than 200 sick. The great hall was crowded with councilmen, physicians, military commanders, and noble families seeking reassurance. Beyond the doors, servants waited with carts of clean linen and boiled water. Wagons stood prepared in the courtyard. Everyone was looking at Clara. Months earlier, that attention would have made her lower her eyes. Now it made her speak clearly. We leave within the hour. Lord Shaw rose from his chair. The roads are nearly closed. The storm will bury the mountain pass. Then we ride before it does. You are the king's healer, not a field servant. Clara looked at him. No, I am whatever the dying need me to be. Ethan stood beside the throne, silent. He did not command her to stay. He did not order guards to protect her from her own decision. He understood that love was not the same as possession. What do you require? He asked. Every physician willing to work without rank. Every wagon that can carry grain, boiled water, vinegar, clean blankets, and enough guards to keep frightened men from stealing supplies. Ethan turned to Captain Mason. You heard her. The hall moved. Not around the Alpha King. Around Clara. For 6 days, they worked in villages where the air smelled of smoke, sickness, and wet earth. Clara slept in barns, washed blood from children's mouths, and taught farmers how to burn contaminated stores without spreading the mold. Dr. Whitmore worked beside her until his hands shook. Mason carried bodies when there were not enough men left to do it. Ethan distributed grain himself. No crown, no throne, only a dark cloak, broad shoulders, and hands that lifted sacks beside common soldiers. On the 7th morning, the fever broke. The first child to recover was a girl named Hannah, 6 years old, with pale braids and a voice too strong for her weakened body. She looked at Clara and asked, Are you the king's lady? Clara smiled. I am his healer. Ethan, standing in the doorway, heard her. He said nothing until they returned to Blackwood Keep. Spring arrived slowly that year. Snow withdrew from the valleys, rivers broke free beneath the ice, and green returned to the northern fields. On the first warm evening, Ethan asked Clara to walk with him beyond the castle walls. No guards followed. No council waited. No witnesses stood ready to turn the moment into politics. They stopped beneath an old pine overlooking the kingdom. Villages glowed in the distance. Smoke rose from chimneys where families were eating clean bread. Ethan removed a small silver ring from his pocket. There was no jewel, only 2 wolves carved into the metal, walking side by side. I will not ask you to stand behind my throne, he said. Clara looked at the ring, then at him. I will not ask you to abandon your work. I will not call gratitude love or duty devotion. I have spent months learning the difference. The wind moved through the pine branches. Ethan's voice lowered. I love you because you tell me the truth when everyone else chooses comfort. Because you see the people power teaches men to overlook. Because my son laughs differently when you enter a room. Clara's throat tightened. And because, he continued, you never needed a crown to change this kingdom. He held out the ring. Walk beside me. Not as payment. Not as reward. As my equal. Clara had once believed powerful men only offered choices after deciding the answer for you. Ethan waited. So she made him wait a little longer. Then she placed her hand in his. Yes. Noah came running from behind the pine tree before Ethan could slide the ring onto her finger. I told you she would say yes. Clara stared at him. You were listening? I was guarding the king. Ethan closed his eyes. Noah grinned. Clara laughed, and the sound carried down the hillside toward the villages below. Weeks later, When she entered the great hall in a simple white gown, the entire kingdom stood. Not because she had become visible by marrying a king, because long before anyone offered her a crown, she had already taught them how to see. Ethan waited at the end of the hall. Noah stood beside him holding a wooden wolf with uneven legs. Clara walked toward them without lowering her eyes, and every servant entered through the front doors. Years later, people told the story incorrectly. They said Clara Bennett had walked into the prince's chamber and performed a miracle. They said she had known exactly what to do. They said courage had made her fearless. Clara never corrected them. Most people preferred miracles because miracles required nothing from those who witnessed them. They did not demand better listening, better questions, or the humility to believe someone without a title. The truth was less comfortable. Clara had been terrified. She had acted anyway. On the 10th anniversary of Noah's recovery, Blackwood Keep opened its doors to healers from every northern territory. Physicians arrived in embroidered robes. Village midwives came carrying worn leather bags. Servants, herbalists, soldiers, and women once forbidden from entering royal schools filled the great hall together. Above them hung no banners of noble families, only the silver emblem of two wolves walking side by side. Clara stood at the center of the hall in a dark blue gown, the sleeves rolled back from her wrists. The scars on her palms had faded almost completely, though Noah still claimed he could see them whenever she was about to disagree with someone important. He was 18 now, tall like his father, broad through the shoulders, with gray eyes that had lost none of their humor. The heir's medallion at his throat contained no black stone. Clara had designed the replacement herself. Iron outside, clear glass within. Nothing hidden. Noah stepped onto the platform beside her. The room fell quiet. 10 years ago, he said, the most educated people in the kingdom watched me die. Several physicians lowered their eyes. A maid did not save me because she knew more than everyone else. Clara looked at him. He smiled slightly. She saved me because she noticed what everyone else had decided was beneath their attention. He turned toward the assembled students. This school will admit anyone capable of learning. Rank will not be mistaken for intelligence. Poverty will not be mistaken for ignorance. And no person will be punished for asking the question that keeps someone alive. Applause rose through the hall. Not polite applause. The sound of hundreds of hands striking together with enough force to shake dust from the rafters. Ethan stood near the front. Time had placed silver at his temples, but it had not diminished him. He remained tall, powerful, and impossible to overlook. Yet when Clara descended from the platform, he did not extend his hand as a king expecting obedience. He waited. She took it because she chose to. Outside, bells rang across the courtyard as the new royal school of healing opened its doors. A young maid stood near the entrance holding a stack of folded linens. She hesitated at the threshold, watching titled physicians pass through ahead of her. Clara stopped. "What is your name?" The girl looked startled. "Emily, your majesty." "What do you see, Emily?" The girl glanced toward a nearby treatment table. "The candle flame is bending away from that silver cup." Clara smiled. Behind her, Ethan's expression softened. "Then you should come inside." Emily looked at the grand doors. Through the front. Clara stepped aside, especially through the front. The girl entered. No one stopped her. And that was how Clara measured the kingdom's change, not by the crown she wore, nor by the man who loved her, nor by the songs written about the night she saved a prince. She measured it by the doors that remained open after she was gone.